On August 13, 2026, Carlos Cuesta-Rodriguez was executed in Oklahoma for the brutal murder of Olimpia Fisher. 13 days before the killing, Olimpia walked into the Oklahoma City Police Department with bruises on her arms and her stomach. She told officers Carlos had beaten her and strangled her with a belt. They were ready to help her. But Olimpia panicked and left the station before anyone could photograph her injuries. She said she didn't want him arrested. 13 days later, Olimpia was dead inside the home they shared while police stood just feet away, unable to get to her. This is what happened. Olimpia and her adult daughter, Katya, lived together with Carlos in a home in southwest Oklahoma City. Carlos and Olimpia had bought the house jointly, and for a while, things worked. But over the months that followed, the relationship between them fell apart. Olimpia was pulling long hours as a packer for a moving company, while Carlos became convinced she was seeing someone else. Every time Olimpia or Katya left the house, he interrogated them. Where were they going? Who would they see? When would they be back? It got so bad that both of them wanted the other one gone, and the tension just kept building. Olimpia had tried to get out. She had walked into that police station, shown her bruises, told them about the belt. And then she left. She was afraid of what would happen if Carlos got arrested, afraid of what he would do when he got out. So she went back to the house, back to him. That decision gave her 13 more days. On the evening of May 31, 2003, Carlos called Olimpia's cell phone. She told him she was at work. But Carlos had driven past her job earlier that day. He knew she wasn't there. Convinced she was lying, convinced she was with someone else, he went home. He opened a bottle of tequila, and he drank the whole thing. Around 10 that night, Katya came home to a dark house. She was 18 years old and 5 months pregnant. She found the empty tequila bottle on the counter, and next to it, a handwritten note. It read, "Bitches and puntas, goodbye." Katya tried calling her mother, but couldn't reach her. So she left the house, picked Olimpia up from work, and the two of them got a late dinner at McDonald's. When they got back, Carlos was still inside, passed out. They had planned to pack their things and leave that night. But rather than wake him, they decided to stay until morning. Katya slept in her own room, while Olimpia slept in a spare bedroom down the hall. Around 4:30 in the morning, Katya woke to the sound of shouting. Her mother and Carlos were arguing. Katya got up, walked to the room where they were fighting, and convinced Olimpia to come back with her. She thought if they could just close the door and wait it out, he would leave them alone. But he didn't. Carlos followed them into Katya's bedroom, still shouting, still accusing Olimpia of cheating on him. Olimpia reached for a phone, but Carlos ripped it out of her hands and threw it across the room. And then he pulled out a double-barreled .45 caliber pistol loaded with 4 10 shotgun shells and fired into Olimpia's right eye. Not a regular bullet, a shotgun shell, at point-blank range, through her eye. Katya reached under her bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and swung at Carlos. He caught the bat mid-swing, ripped it from her hands, and threw it to the floor. Then he pointed the gun at Katya, 18 years old, 5 months pregnant, standing feet away from her mother, who had just been shot in the face. Katya ran. She made it out of the house, reached a neighbor's door, and called 911. And somehow, Olimpia was still alive. Carlos dragged her into his bedroom. And despite having her right eye destroyed, Olimpia fought. She screamed. She struggled against him. She banged on the bedroom window, trying to break through the glass, trying to get someone to hear her. The police arrived within 2 minutes. Officers could hear Olimpia screaming from outside. They could hear her fists pounding on the window. But every door and every window in that house was covered with metal burglar bars. The same bars that had been installed to keep intruders out were now keeping her trapped inside and keeping police from getting to her. Officers tried kicking in the front door, but it didn't move. And while they were still trying to force their way in, they heard a second shot. And Olimpia's screaming stopped. With Olimpia dead and Carlos still armed, police called in a tactical team. A hostage negotiator tried to talk him out, but Carlos stayed barricaded inside that house for 3 hours. Eventually, the team forced their way through the front door using a specialized hydraulic tool. And Carlos didn't fight. He didn't run. He was arrested and taken to the station, where he gave statements over the next 2 days. In both interviews, he admitted to shooting Olimpia, but he said the first shot was an accident. He told detectives the gun went off while Olimpia tried to grab it, and when pressed about the alcohol, he said something that would come back to haunt his own defense. He told police he hadn't acted because he was drunk. He said he acted out of anger because he believed she was seeing other men. Those were his own words. But this wasn't the first time Carlos had been in trouble. Carlos Cuesta-Rodriguez came to the United States from Cuba in 1980 during the Mariel boat lift. After arriving, he was convicted in California for possession of heroin for sale and spent a year in federal prison. He eventually settled in Oklahoma City, worked construction for a company called Forest Lumber for 10 years, and by most accounts was a hard worker. But Olimpia was not the first woman who had tried to get away from Carlos. His third ex-wife had filed for a protection order against him after he turned up drinking, angry, and violent. Prosecutors described a pattern that stretched back years: controlling behavior, jealous outbursts, abuse, one relationship to the next. Carlos went to trial in Oklahoma County in 2007, and the prosecution built their case around one argument. This was a calculated act of domestic violence by a man who could not accept that a woman was leaving him. And the evidence backed it up. The medical examiner walked the jury through Olimpia's injuries. 2 shotgun wounds to the face, the first through her right eye, the second through her left. Her eye sockets had been shattered, her skull fractured, blood had filled her airway. And the examiner testified that Olimpia most likely died from choking on her own blood and that the process could have taken as long as 8 minutes. He identified the second shot as the more likely cause of death. But it was the firearms examiner who sealed it. An expert from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation told the jury that the pistol Carlos used was unusual. It required several sequential steps to be fired a second time. So that second shot wasn't a reflex. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Prosecutors told the jury that Olimpia could have survived the first shot, but Carlos refused to surrender. He refused to open the door. He refused to let anyone help her. And then he fired again. And there was one detail that nobody in the courtroom forgot. Olimpia's ex-boyfriend took the stand. He testified that when Olimpia left him for Carlos, she told him she had put her eyes on somebody else. Those were her exact words. And Carlos shot her through both of them. The defense told the jury about the metal plate in Carlos's skull from a childhood bus accident in Cuba. They talked about electroshock therapy he received as a child in a psychiatric facility. They described a tractor accident at the lumber yard. They said he had borderline personality disorder, depression, and a dependency on pain medication. And his coworkers and family members asked the jury to spare his life. But the prosecution argued for death on 2 grounds: that the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, and that Carlos posed a continuing threat to society. The jury agreed with both. Carlos Cuesta-Rodriguez was sentenced to death. For more than 20 years, his case moved through the courts. His attorneys argued that trial counsel had failed to present evidence of organic brain damage and PTSD. The state and federal courts reviewed it, but none of them changed the outcome. In June 2026, Oklahoma Attorney General Gaynor Drummond asked the Pardon and Parole Board to deny clemency. Carlos Cuesta-Rodriguez is a violent domestic abuser and murderer who should not be granted the mercy he refused to show to Olimpia Fisher, Drummond said. Olimpia's daughters and family have endured unimaginable pain for the past 23 years. On July 14, 2026, Carlos appeared at his clemency hearing by video from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. His defense attorneys made their case one more time: childhood trauma, brain injuries, mental illness. But Carlos said something different. Speaking mostly in Spanish through a translator, he told the board he wasn't there to ask for anything. He said he came to apologize to Olimpia's daughters. "I know that nothing I say will be enough to erase your pain, to offer some kind of comfort or get her back," he read from a written statement. "But I do want to tell you that I regret it, and I am truly remorseful from the bottom of my heart. My time has come, and I want to leave, and I want to leave in peace. And if I am forgiven someday, well, I will be forgiven. But it's time for me to pay for what I did." Then, in English, "I don't want any clemency. I don't want any mercy." The board chair, Robert Rivas II, said he had been somewhat inclined to vote for clemency, but changed his mind after hearing Carlos's own words. The board voted 3-1 to deny it. Olimpia's daughter Katya also spoke at the hearing. She told the board that Carlos could have helped her mother after the first shot. He could have surrendered. He could have opened the door and let paramedics in, but instead he waited. And then he fired again. "Carlos chose to take my mother's life," Katya said. "He didn't just hurt her. He hurt all of us who knew her, who loved her, who needed her. He took a great person who did not deserve to die." She pushed back on every excuse the defense had offered. Carlos was not mentally ill. He was not sick when this tragic event happened. He was not drunk. And Carlos himself had told police the same thing 23 years earlier. He wasn't drunk. He was angry. Katya told the board that her PTSD from that night is so severe that 23 years later, she still cannot open a can of biscuits on Sunday morning for her kids. The sound takes her back to that bedroom. The board's decision cleared the way for the execution. Carlos had no appeals left, no legal challenges pending, no path to clemency. The date was set, August 13, 2026. In the weeks that followed, Carlos was moved from his cell on death row to a holding cell near the execution chamber at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. After 23 years on death row, he was now counting days. Then, on the evening of August 12th, Carlos ate his last meal at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. He requested a Cuban sandwich, Rocky Road ice cream, a few donuts, and a bottle of water. The following morning, Carlos was escorted from his holding cell to the execution chamber at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. After 23 years on death row, it was a short walk. He was strapped to a gurney, and IV lines were inserted into his arms. When the curtain was pulled back and the witnesses could see him, Carlos was asked if he had any final words. A month earlier, he had told the parole board, "It's time for me to pay for what I did." But in the execution chamber, the man who had asked for no mercy said nothing. The drugs began to flow. 13 minutes later, the usual checks were performed. There was no response. Carlos Cuesta-Rodriguez was pronounced dead at 10:13 in the morning. He was 70 years old. And Carlos Rodriguez wasn't the only man America put to death on August 13th. He was one of three. 3 men, 3 different states, all executed in a single day. And that hadn't happened in 16 years, not since 2010. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.